Hey guys, John Paul here. I am in front of my computer and I thought I'd do a little bit of a quick down and dirty stitching panoramas video for you. I was out yesterday doing a little scouting for my spring workshop and I was looking at a scene, considering it for a panoramic image. And I thought, while I'm doing some video out here, I've got my digital camera. I went ahead and I took my Nikon D800 and I turned it vertically. I did 8 images that I shot vertically and overlapping in order to create what will be a panoramic. And I thought it might be a neat opportunity, since so many people ask me about stitching panoramas in my workshops, that thought I'd share with you. Now, I'll give a couple of quick insights verbally here before I walk through the actual digital darkroom part of this in Lightroom and Photoshop. First of all, ideally, if you're going to be stitching panoramics, you're going to want to get some type of panoramic rail system on your that fits on your tripod head. And what that does is it enables you to set a rotation point. They call it the nodal point in between your lens plane and your sensor, or what used to be the film plane on your camera. So you can set that up at a point at which you can rotate your camera to move around to each of the shots and not distort or warp. You can look that up online. I'm not going to go in depth about it. I don't have one of those. What I do is I make sure my tripod is perfectly level. For the next step, I make sure my tripod head is perfectly level. And I do that by leveling it. It's got a bubble level attached on each of those things. And as the next step is I rotate my tripod head the full range of rotation that I'll need for the image I want to take, and I'll make sure that it maintains a perfectly level aspect. The next step that I do is I have an L-shaped mounting bracket on my camera, so I can turn my camera vertically. And that way I'm using the longest part of the sensor for the vertical aspect of the images to get as much information as I can there. And then as I rotate, I take an exposure overlapping anywhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the scene, so that the software has a lot of information to interpolate when it stitches it together. One very important thing when doing these panoramas, and I've tried to make a habit of it, is the first thing I will do is set my camera to manual mode. And then we want the entire scene to be metered exactly the same, so it'll blend nicely together between each of the individual images. So I'll actually go to a relatively wide angle on my zoom lens and meter that scene. Take a test shot, make sure the histogram looks good and that the scene looks good to me with that exposure, and then I lock that exposure and I leave that on manual. Then I go ahead, turn the camera vertically. I will focus and I'll leave it on manual focus so that the focal point doesn't change throughout each of the scenes. If you've got things both further away and closer to the camera, you don't want that to change accidentally throughout your image taking process. Really, that's about it. The other big thing as a film shooter that I'm very conscious of with digital is the fact that many lenses, I want to say most, have fall off in clarity on the corners of the scenes. And so that factor, along with the fact that I'm not using a nodal rail, so I can get a little bit of distortion depending on how wide a lens I'm using as I move my camera around the scene. I will use quite a bit larger lens, wider lens, if you will. and I'll capture quite a bit more of the scene in each shot than I'm intending or envisioning that I'm going to use within that panorama. And that way, there's room to crop out softer aspects of the image or areas where there's a little bit of distortion. So I leave myself a lot of room for error from a technical standpoint with the equipment. So those are basics. Perhaps I'll put a brief ebook together at some point soon if I get enough requests for that, and walk you through step by step. So now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna move away from the camera, and I'm going to go ahead and move into Lightroom Classic in the Creative Cloud 2018, and I'm going to show you how easily we can stitch these images together into a panorama, remain in a raw file format, go ahead and work on that whole image as one piece, as a raw file in Lightroom for my basic adjustments, and then if we want to, move over to Photoshop Creative Cloud 2018 to do any fine-tuning that we wish to do. So I hope you enjoy this. I'll see you in the digital darkroom. Okay guys, so we're here in Adobe Lightroom Classic Creative Cloud, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you the basics of taking those images. I've already described basic procedure for taking images that we want to stitch together. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the 8 images that I took, and I already loaded them, imported them into my library. Now I'm in my develop module, and I've got one image selected. Now I'm going to click Shift and click on the last image. Now all 8 images are selected. I'm going to go up to Photo, Photo Merge, and Panorama. Now Lightroom is going to create a preview here, and that'll take a second, so we'll take a break here. I'll be right back. Okay guys, so this is a great example of what I spoke of in the introduction video, where I did not have a nodal slider to align my camera centered between the sensor plane and the front lens element plane. So when I swiveled my tripod head and rotated around to capture each of the images throughout the process, there is some misalignment and distortion. Now everything is stitched cleanly, but this is a wonderful example as to why I shot a fair amount wider angle than I intended to use, and it also, is a great example of what you'll have to deal with if you don't want to invest $100 or $200 in a rail system to create panoramas. It's not insurmountable. We just shoot with the forethought of how we're going to do this. So let's see here. First of all, I generally leave the panorama in perspective mode. You can also use cylindrical or spherical. And I'll be honest with you, when I studied about doing this, perspective was what I was shown to use, and it seems to keep everything aligned and non-distorted within the frame. So I've just stuck with that. You can look more deeply into it. Next item is boundary warp, and this looks really cool with how it will basically fix the perspective issues that we had. I think it's probably a great way to go, given that we are using a raw file. I would look more deeply into it relative to if there's any degradation of the image file or quality. So I think it'll work great. It looks great. You can leave it at that and go with it. For the sake of showing what I've historically been doing, I'll get rid of boundary warp. The other thing you can do is click the auto crop, and that basically, as you can see in the upper corners, just eliminates and crops down on this portion of the image here that is that's kind of distorted out of the rectangular realm of the image. So that's something that really, it's kind of quick and easy, and you can use that. Why don't we go ahead with that? And then we simply hit merge. And now, if you look up here in the left-hand corner, Lightroom is creating the full resolution panorama. So as you can imagine, stitching 8 high-resolution raw files from a professional camera together, this is going to take a while. So I'm going to go ahead and leave you here for a moment. Okay guys, Lightroom is done working away, and we now have, as you see down at the bottom here in our menu, we have a stitched together raw panoramic image. And so really kind of exciting, because in the past we had to photo merge to Photoshop, and it would eliminate the raw file as one stitched image, and it would eliminate our ability to do the lossless adjustments that we do. So anyway, I'm going to show you quickly that was the basis of what I wanted to share. We now have a panoramic raw file, and that's pretty fantastic. If I might perhaps go up here and choose the cropping tool, and then it shows us the full borders again. But we might, if we wanted to, we could choose to really bring things in. We could crop it as we wish, eliminating different aspects of the photo. We hit return or enter, and there we have, we've got a cropped panorama. To share with you, just to finish up, the couple of adjustments that I generally use in Lightroom, I may adjust the color temperature. To me, this looks a little cool. So, depending, people like different things. I might warm it up a touch. Between 4,000 and 5,000 degrees Kelvin is daylight, and so daylight color temperature. When I warm things up, I still want to keep it natural. I want to make sure I don't lose the cool tones in the blues. That's something you can more selectively do in Photoshop. And then the other thing I look at is my highlight and my shadows in Lightroom. Highlights, oftentimes I will pull them all the way down, and you can see on the histogram up here that I've pulled my highlights away from the end of the histogram, so I'm not clipping, and you can see that brought a little greater detail into the sky, even though I'm not sure if I would include sky in this image. Next thing I would often do is grab my shadow slider, and I would brighten that all the way up. And again, I'm making sure I don't have any clipping here on the shadow end of things. Now, I will tell you that this is, to my taste, very flat because I've done those things, but my normal workflow, if I were shooting digital, would be to go up to Photo, Edit In, and I'd hop right over to Adobe Photoshop Creative Cloud, and I would finish up the image there. That's not what I'm doing in this video. The other thing I may look at doing, I may save till the end when I have all of my highlights and shadows adjusted, so that I can make my color adjustments last. Is in Photoshop, you can do it here, is use the vibrance slider a bit. That obviously is pretty grotesque, but I'll double click that, bring it back to 0. So anyway, the idea here was to show you that you can very easily create a stitched panorama, which compared to shooting one frame and cropping, leaves us with vastly more resolution. We can do it in a very clean way with some of the methods I brought up in the introduction video, and we can now do it so that our resulting stitch panorama is in RAW, which enables us to use all the adjustments and the power of Lightroom to create lossless adjustments and really bring out what we had envisioned in our minds. I hope this was helpful for you. I'll now hop out of here. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, thanks again for following me here and taking part. I hope this video was really informative. I hope you found it helpful. Please leave comments below. I'd love to learn what you liked or didn't like and what I can share with you in the future. Please leave suggestions. The other thing is, go ahead and like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to create a great community here where we can all help each other out. Share this with folks that you think might find it interesting and helpful for their photography. Finally, I'll have some helpful links below. If you enjoy what I share and how I share it, you might enjoy spending some time with me in the field. I'll put a link down below regarding my workshops. Most of them are private and custom. Some of them are group workshops. So take a peek, get a hold of me. I'd love to take you out in the field and really help you take your photography to the next level. Thank you again for following along. Now, get out there and do some photography today. Happy shooting.